Chief Alpine Napier. Welcome to Circle Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our trip around this 5x5 layer Likert layer that we've been using purely as a reference point. The more I say that I want to use it just as kind of like a reference instead of thinking of it as an official layer of the change grid, the more we're playing with it, the more I think, well, there's no reason why this couldn't at least be a quick reference guide layer of the change grid. So I think that's what I'd like to walk away with after we're all done. So I've been taking notes as we talk about different things that are happening in different locations. And I've also been fleshing that out with some of the standard stuff you guys learned. You know, we went through the your training on comparative human typological analysis, and we looked at a whole bunch of different 4 type and 5 type, 8 type, 9 type models. There were some nice reference tools we could bring out from there. Obviously, we've got cheat sheets all ready for the 5 levels of tension, so I pulled some of that copy into it as well. But my goal is to be able to come up with kind of a scripted sort of a, don't want to say a reading or an interpretation because that's how it's going to be used, but sort of a highlights, if you will, of what's going on in each of these different regions of the change grid and how that particular region might serve you well, how it could be problematic, you know, just kind of give people a sense of what's happening in that location. So anyway, thoughts about that as we talk about our little desired outcome? No, Brian,
No.
T, you're the two that are muted, so they've all thrown the burden on your shoulders. So.
No, it sounds good.
Okay, good. Yeah, yeah. You guys are. You know me well enough to know that silence is agreement. And so, so last time around, you know, I don't want people to bog themselves down with the scales when they get their first introduction to this using the Oracle of the Self thing we're putting up online. I just wanted to kind of go think about a particular situation happening in your world, whatever it is, and ask yourself, how would you rate your ability to make it turn out the way you want it to? Would you give yourself a low ability, a moderate, a high, moderately high, moderate? How would you rate your ability? And similarly, how would you rate the challenge? So that in turn is going to, and that by the way is a video that's just kind of walking them through the process. And then they, based on what section they land in, it's going to have a number. I want to see if I can make areas of a YouTube screen clickable. I certainly don't think I can make 25 areas clickable. So I think what I have to do is just put a lookup guide in the description block underneath that video that says, click on the number of where you landed, and you can listen to another video that gives you the highlights of what's going on there. Does that sound like an interesting thing to you guys?
Yes. You know, something I was thinking about is that cheat sheet you have where it has the physical cues,
Yeah.
emotional cues. You know what I'm talking about? That
Yep, I do.
sheet
Yeah.
on the different response states, because that sheet was helpful for me and
Yeah.
is helpful for me.
Yeah, we always we call that's form D1 and D2.
Okay.
And so I think that's really great when you're talking about the 5 levels of tension. But here's my big vision to this whole thing, so you guys see how it all fits together. I've decided at this stage of life that I can't work with clients anymore. They take too much time. They distract me from what I consider to be the more important work that I should be doing. And the more important work is getting all this intellectual property put up in a way that people can approach and embrace and benefit from, and in a way that simultaneously creates opportunity for people who have been trained in how to really read a change grid. So if I can create this online YouTube based sort of, you know, come for a little counsel, what, you know, consult your oracle, what does your oracle say today? You know, you think of those as kind of like the little thumbnails. Let people come. It's just going to ask them one thing. Think about a situation. What's going on in your life? Answer 2 questions. Look at where you landed as far as medium, and high, the number you landed on, and then click on that. And now you're going to hear probably a 5-minute or so kind of reading of what could happen there. And then I want to be able to say to people that if they find this interesting, if they find this useful, what they really need to do is have a journey experience with a ChangeWorks professional. And so that journey experience, you would meet with them for, in my estimation, 4 hours.
Mhm.
So the first hour you would just spend talking to them, walking along the path of self-discovery, extracting activities, populating the activity list and whatever. And then you're going to send it to them, they fill it out. Then I think you're going to need to have a jumbo session, like a 2-hour session, where you can go over results and start to put together some sorts of action plans for the more important ones, or whichever ones you decide. You can't do all of them depending on how many activities you came up with. And by the way, on the side note, I'd be encouraging you to create a rather robust activity list with not just a few activities, but a dozen or 15 or 18, whatever you're comfortable with, because I want you to be simultaneously able to provide the individual with meaningful coaching based on what their change grid showed, put together action plans. But I want to know that the majority of activities, there simply isn't time to do those in the couple hours you're spending together. Why would I want that to be the case?
Well, part of it is that I think they need to also be able to coach themselves in time,
Right.
and to be
Right.
able to look at themselves and see that it's kind of a self-awareness
Yes.
and sharpening the saw for themselves, to use those old archaic, cliches, but it's about self-coaching.
Yep, yep. And so I want to know that at the end of this little experience, they're feeling compelled to either seek out services, education, or both.
Mhm.
And as they seek out the services, that to me opens up a great opportunity for all of you guys, because all of you who are certified licensed to do it, there's a listing on the website where they can reach out and have this journey experience. So the fourth hour is you would do a checkup, maybe a couple of weeks later, check in with them, see how they're going on. But my hope is that from the act of filling out a change grid, all by itself, the act of filling out a change grid is a very powerful developmental experience.
Yeah.
You help them come up with all the activities. Now we've put them in a situation where we ask them to actually give serious thought to each one of these activities. And obviously, some of those activities are going to reveal themselves as being those of higher tension, higher drive, or both. And that's where the client is going to want to really do their work. So maybe they'll engage you to do some follow through or ongoing coaching to start getting into those activities that you were not able to address directly. So whether it leads to services, education, or both, I'd like to think that this could very much create some buzz.
Well, T, one of the things I always think about, and this is T, by the way, for everybody else, but I
The two
always think,
T's.
yeah. So I always think that even talking about the activities is an intervention,
Mhm.
because sometimes they don't think about it, and they don't reflect about it. And so through your questions, you can help them dig a little farther as to what is the real activity they should be doing.
Yep, absolutely right. And so even during your first session with them, your first conversation with them, that walk along the path of self-discovery is a very powerful standalone experience.
Mhm.
And the thought that we're taking that experience of having this dialogue with them, and all the great developmental things that come out of that, even you get to the yellow for the solution kind of phase. Now there's all this task stuff that arises. So if they want to go from point A to point B, whatever it is they were thinking about, there's work to be done. And you guys are helping them figure out what is that work that needs to be done. What is that best way to approach doing the task, eating the elephant, whatever. And then following through to kind of keep them on track of what they're going. I mean, that's what people ultimately I think are wanting or needing. So that's
Yeah.
developmental. When they fill out a change grid, and you actually, if I said to you guys, think about any activity happening in your life right now, how do you rate your ability to get it to turn out the way you want it to? How challenging it's going to be? You're going to end up with coordinates. The thoughts that you had to go into answer those questions about ability and challenge, I believe, were already a developmental experience for somebody.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
I like
so,
this. It's
right.
developmental is, when I use my journals, because I've been journaling since I was a young lad. This reminds me of the spiral dynamics, particularly when we're talking about developmental. If I remember my Latin correctly, development shares the same root word as envelope. And so you have to open oneself up. And that is an ongoing process, right? It's not a
Yeah.
one size fits all, a once and done thing. So you have to, when you're talking about the growth and evolution of things, I don't think people give themselves enough time for that kind of reflection that is needed. So I like this as a tool
Yeah.
that they can continue that development as they get to one stage and come back. Like the question I always ask myself is, am I wiser coming out of this? In
Mhm.
other words,
Mhm.
I don't want to be I don't think we're designed to face the same crises over and over again. I was often told that meant that I did not get the lesson the first time. And so I'm
Mhm.
always asking myself, am I wiser, coming back? Like, am I at this higher consciousness or whatever we choose to call it?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So I think that's what this could help people do.
Yep. 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 And the part again that I think is most critical of the whole thing is what we're doing today on this 25 block kind of area. This is where we are acknowledging the fact that the change grid, I want to say this correctly so I'm not demeaning my life's work. Uh, the change grid has an aspect to it that lends itself to a parlor game.
Mm,
One of these quick little fun experiential things when you guys fill out like a BuzzFeed survey, those quizzes are irresistible, even though it's just a gimmick to get you to look at a lot of advertising along the way. But people kind of want something that's easily approachable, easy to do with some, immediate satisfaction from doing it. And so that's what this is really kind of all about. Because I think that if people find the parlor game fascinating, valuable, intriguing, they'll find the serious application that much more appealing, right? And so this is what I'm really trying to do.
yeah.
And I guess the truth be told is I don't want to put up a YouTube web product that has 169 videos you might listen to. Who wants to scroll through that list trying to find? It's too much. It's too much. So
Yeah. It's
yeah.
like a lighthouse, right? So,
Yeah.
the lighthouse, you know, sends a signal out where you can now see and become confident and comfortable, and there's land there. Now, what
Yeah.
you do once you get there is up to you.
Right. Or right. Yeah. 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 Because very interesting. Very interesting.
Hey T.
Yes.
So I may have missed this part, but the way the numbers are laid out, and it hit me when Brian was talking about spiral dynamics. Is it based on the philosophy of spiral dynamics? Because I'm looking at how you go from 1 to
I'd like to
3.
say it was. I'd feel a lot more intelligent if I
Okay.
the truth is it's the layout of Paris. So, you know, we're at a French club, and so we're always looking at Paris. And Paris is divided in what are called arrondissements, which is probably closest to like neighborhood.
Mhm.
They number their neighborhoods, but the neighborhoods aren't small things. They're big enough that they have kind of a governing body at that kind of neighborhood level, that has a role in city function and city whatever. So it's bigger than the concept of a neighborhood, but it's not like a village or anything like that. Nevertheless, they divide their city. And when you are visiting Paris and you want to go and see something, it's going to tell you which one of these arrondissements it's located in. And you need to know that they're arranged in a spiral that radiates out of the actual center of the city, historic center of the city. And and goes around. So 1, 2, 3. So that's what I did. Interestingly enough, that's one of the things I want to talk about as we start to finalize this. Is there a different way we should number them that makes sense? Because I also want to know that someone who listens to them in order is being told a story that ultimately educates them about the change grid. Like in this particular case, doing it this way is teaching them about the center of the change grid and what's all great about that before you start to step out to where life is lived in numbers 2 through 9, before you get into where life becomes a bit extreme or problematic as you move, outside of that red circle or on the edges of that red circle. So that was my kind of thought. I'd like to make number 1 the place we believe is most powerful on the change grid. And for us, that's number 1. But people that are running businesses probably would say, but I like number 3. I even like 14, because they're trying to make something happen. I want a whole team of 3, 13, 14s, 15s. This is who I want. This is who I want on my team.
Which could be true, but if in my opinion, working with these entrepreneurs, if it's not coming from the point number 1, then it becomes distorted quite easily.
Well, exactly.
Rapidly, burnout.
Yeah, you need the voice of number. If you're a 14, if there's a 14 in your reality, a 3 has a good way of helping them focus. And a 1 has a great ability to, I think, help a person find a healthier frame to put around whatever it is they happen to want to be doing out here.
Well, it helps them listen for sure.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'll tell you, I'm never going to say that on these basic YouTube videos, but for the advanced thinkers around all things tension management, we get it. We get it, that this is too far out grid and someone needs to tone it down, pull it back a little bit. So, and again, this was kind of something that popped off of when we're talking about the 2 voices. I said the truth is we have a whole choir in our head. And they're not all singing the same song, and they're not singing them in the same style at the same time. It becomes very chaotic in your thinking. It becomes noise. So how do you go about calming, getting them all on the same page, singing together? That's what moving things into the inner circle and then the innermost circle, and ultimately the PowerPoint would all be about. And so what I want to do is say, look, when you want to know about these voices that are in your head, I'll tell you, there's 25 different types of voices we can look at, or basic, types of voices that we could be looking at. And if you happen to find yourself in a place on the change grid that puts you in a particular area, there's a special voice that's going to be triggered inside your head while you're there. And so if you guys are doing something and you perceive your ability as being, say, an 8 or a 9, or in this case, moderately high, and the challenge is very high, well, think about that for a second. If you're moderately high ability, high level of challenge, what's your head saying when you're in that space? Right? So that's a real question, everybody. What does your head say? When you're of moderately high ability and high level of challenge? Is it giving you negative messages, positive messages? What's it telling you?
Well, to me, it's positive because you have the ability. You need to have the confidence too, though.
Yeah.
So, and the self-esteem. So if you have the ability, which is only one part of your competency,
yes,
you also need the characteristics of self-esteem and confidence so that you'll be able to meet the 13.
Yep. Because you've got this high level of challenge. And so this is a place where you have great confidence in yourself, because again, you are out grid. A good deal of that is in power. If we started looking at all the sub layers, this again is just a way to kind of hit the highlights so people can kind of go like, yeah, that feels right. This voice is probably very encouraging. Most of that little neighborhood 13 is where the expressive driver energy would be. So a lot of enthusiasm, motivated, energized, but they know a test is afoot. So they are kind of pumping themselves up, and they are kind of looking at the best possible situation.
So that would be that confidence that Shannon just described would be the exact opposite of 10, right? Because 10, the challenge is greater there, so you're not confident at all. In fact, you're probably screaming.
Yeah,
Like
right.
the
And see
voices are probably that
that's
loud.
right. And see, that's what I want to talk about. This is the voice inside of your head. And so if you're at location number 10, and before I go into this, I want to say it may very well be true that physically you are in a number 10 situation, right? You could be in a really that far up grid life or death situation. So if that helps, do that. But if you're up there on the change grid, you think you've got very low ability and a very high level of challenge. What's the voice in your head saying now?
Yep.
Help.
Yeah, help, protect protect yourself, whatever, lots of self-preservation, warning sorts of things, tremendous sense of urgency, desperation, all the things about the upgrade danger zone obviously would be there. We just have to hit the highlights of it, I think, for someone to have this little 5-minute kind of experience.
But if a person says help, I think they're already moving out of 10, moving down grid. The thing that
yeah,
they're probably saying they don't even know that they may need help. They're just overwhelmed.
yeah.
Overwhelmed. A lot of times they don't know how to ask for help or what to do.
Right, because up there, we have anger, grief, fear, and shame. In that particular example, it would be about fear.
The word I was thinking of is run.
Yes.
Yeah, well, and that's it. So the fight or flight, flight is upgrid, fight is outgrid. Yeah, flight is upgrid, fight is outgrid. And then there's also fade and freeze. Freeze is downgrid, fade is ingrid.
See, when they're in an amygdala hijack state and 10, your reasoning capacities are minimized because your extremities that's where all the resources are being marshaled for you to fight or flee. And so the things you're doing, although you're probably moving yourself down, they may be somewhat distorted. And you might be moving down, don't even realize that you are. It's kind of like in martial arts when the Sifu would attack us. We know we're going to get attacked, right? But we have a blindfold on. And so you don't know when it's coming or how it's coming. You get the same jolt of fear, but then you take control through your breathing and those other things. And then you can make a reasonable choice on how to utilize the energy instead of trying to resist.
That's right. That's right.
Well, and you start listening differently. I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
You use really all your senses. Well, except for light.
Well, and remember that these little neighborhoods or whatever we're going to call them, sections, I have no idea yet. Give me some ideas. 10, 14, 18, and 22 are all neighbors with one another, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to that whole self-preservation kind of thing, you can see how someone could very easily jump from fleeing to fighting to fading to whatever, because in that moment of great threat, you're trying to figure out very quickly what's available to me. So was that Kathy who pointed out they're looking around for resources, or was that T? One of y'all said they're already starting to look at things, and that's absolutely true. But it's more this, how can I put it? This kind of primal scan that you're taking of the environment around you.
Exactly.
So is it driven so much by logic as much as it's by some self-preservation instinct?
And then we put the label on it. If I remember, a patient came into an emergency room that was suffering, it was cold, because this was in Canada at the time. And I was explaining to him, the shaking is just a natural reaction for the body to warm itself up. The shaking doesn't mean that it's bad, but they were shivering a lot. And so we just simply try to warm them up, and then we can treat the condition. But if you see that shivering when you're cold as bad, then you're already, marshaling resources away from, how to think about reasoning. We used to do this in a wilderness survival exercise all the time. Most people will freeze to death just because they just weren't thinking reasonably.
Yeah. Right. There you go. That's what someone told me, living in Michigan, one of the things that I was told was that the most important pieces of safety equipment for you to have if you're ever going to be in a winter environment, and I'm going to sure that if this is true in Michigan, then it's got to be even more true out west, Montana, where there's large, spaces of land with nobody and nothing, but is an Arctic quality sleeping bag,
Mm.
because that sleeping bag is designed to hold your body temperature, where a little blanket isn't going to do squat. Even your jacket isn't going to do squat. But if you have one of those really good, like Eddie Bauer Arctic sleeping bags,
Mhm.
well, you'll be fine. Because the only thing that's exposed is your nose. So, and even then, there's a flap for it. So, yeah, there you go. Okay, anyway, all right, well, this is all very fine and dandy, but we probably need to jump back into talking about particular numbered areas on there. So we talked about number one, and obviously there's a lot more than 5 minutes worth of stuff we could say, but I'm trying to remember right now what they say the optimal length of a video is on YouTube. It's longer than it used to be. Particularly people who are looking to learn something, that are coming for kind of a developmental kind of thing, they don't mind a bit longer videos. And so I think that we could go between 5 and 7 minutes and be just fine. And then, because again, we do want to be able to say, we'd like you to become a member of our community. That helps us to, it's free. That helps us to now develop kind of a bit of a mailing list or a follower list. And we do want people to seek out the experience of a more in-depth change grid. We do want them to come to Positively Living, which is every week an hour and a half long program. It's just all about good stuff. So there's things we really do want them to do. I just want to make sure that I am wetting their whistle, piquing their curiosity, and giving them some insights that they would deem as being valuable. If for no other reason, then I would like them to come back and play with the Oracle anytime and every time they're facing a question in life. So that'd be great. Absolutely great.
Yeah.
So,
T, have you seen those short takes on YouTube?
yeah, I've been trying to figure out if you have to create those as standalones, or if you can, like, is that one of the miracle things that YouTube?
Yeah, they're like
Right.
most people just film them, I guess, on their mobile phone, and they're like a minute or two. But when you're playing them, it just re-loop itself, so it just continues to play. And then there's like an entire list that you can go through, kind of like automated thing. But
Yeah,
they're very short.
so obviously they're trying to make themselves similar to TikTok in that
Right,
functionality.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So, I'll look in all that kind of stuff, but I think 5 to 7 minutes is plenty. I'm not trying to give away what you guys sell. And so, but, I want to wet someone's whistle, give them an experience with the change grid, and let that lead to either services or joining our community, which ultimately will lead to services or education. So either way. Okay, anyway, well, so we talked about number one, could do a lot more than 5 to 7 minutes on that. Number two, we talked about that as well. This is where things start to get a little more tested. So that situation where now the level of challenge is slightly higher than ability, but we're still in kind of a moderate world overall. And so we talked a bit about that, put someone into more of an interactive mode. This is where good problem solving comes in, where good work is done when it comes to both moving something forward and keeping things energized. Lots of good things can happen right at two. Number three, I think we also talked about, I think that's where we left off, where we're talking about the person who is now moderately outgrid, if you will. So this is moderately high, moderately high. So if you guys were business owners of, where you had lots of employees and all that, how many of you think having a whole flock of people at moderately high might be for you?
Mm.
Moderately high and moderately high.
Yeah, moderately high ability, and they're facing moderately high challenges.
I think they might need some new questions if they want to change.
Sure, yeah, because obviously, if we can move them slightly further out grid, they may be taking on really a stretch kind of an experience. But I'll tell you that if I had an organization where everybody was at 3, what do you think that would feel like on a day-by-day basis? But if
After
you,
a while, you might get burnt out.
yeah, well, but let's think about that. This is where the challenge is high enough that I'm not slipping down grid, and my ability isn't low enough that I'm being pulled up grid. So this is like another day at the office, I'm thinking, but it's an office that's moving forward. Where
That's
you could also say
Yeah.
that the office is down
so
at
bad.
4 or even 5.
It's not such a bad thing. I mean, it's not exciting necessarily, but things are getting done. And they're kind of getting done in a consistent way is what I'm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe if I ran a restaurant, this could be a great place for.
There are certain businesses where this would be fantastic.
Yeah, retail.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be all great. But if I want to be the #1 company in my industry and I want to, raise our bottom line, I'm probably going to, well, we would be hired to help the company do that. And they're going to tell us we need to move people further out grid. They don't know those words, but that's what they're going to tell us.
Yeah. That's not where it is. But for some businesses, I think it could do very well for a long period of time until circumstances change. Yeah.
Exactly. And maybe
Yeah.
this is part of the growth cycle that people step from total comfort into a place of some discomfort, but they feel ready to meet it. As they're more and more comfortable in that spot, they step further out grid. And now that's going to compel them to raise their game, improve their ability to be able to meet that increased challenge. Over a period of time, spiral dynamics, of course, this is going to slip in grid. It's going to become that experience I've just described is going to become the new 3.
Mm.
And then they have to go look for a new 14 and a new 3. You get the idea?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so that's all fine and dandy. So 3 is a good spot to be, but let's slip on down to number 4 for a second. What's happening now in area 4? Area, maybe we'll just call them areas.
Well, it's kind of like the oh hum. I'm getting a little bit more apathetic. My abilities, I'm just not challenged. I'll get around to doing it.
Okay. All right.
More analytical, sort of like an insurance or compliance environment.
Yep. You guys just kind of memorize this square for just a second. Let me start flipping through the layers. Let's see what you might want to say based on a given layer. Right now, you guys are talking a bit more about engagement rings. So I'm right here now. That's where that square number 4 would be. So what do we know about that? And also I want to talk about the 5 levels of tension. Where are we at? So if I move over here, we might as well start with this one. What's going on tension-wise when it comes to this square right here?
So then moderate high, so they'll be efficient there, but I think it was T that was saying, it's just going to be, business as usual instead of business as unusual.
They're also in the process of giving up control.
Right, so they're going to delegate
There's some delegation, there's
some of that down here.
pushing it off your plate.
Right, there's automating it. There's even for a long time, I don't know, I think everyone on the call has been in the business long enough to remember these days where everyone thought they needed a policy and procedure manual. And it ended up being this impossible thing to create, let alone maintain. And then you needed to have all these different copies managed, all these different locations worldwide. And then thankfully, computers started to appear in everybody's desk and they thought like, oh, we could just put it there. That's a lot easier to update. So you guys remember those days?
Oh, yes.
Well,
This looks like an efficiency space to me.
yeah, but the other thing I want to add to that is I think this is a starting to be efficiency space. This is a place where because remember they were in power right now, and this is where all the active problem solving was happening. Then the dust started to settle, and in their heads, they all knew now what they were doing and how it was working. And then they said to somebody, you should write this down so that others can reach it, be able to do it later on. So I'm kind of feeling like that's this particular stage where the one you guys are describing, I think is actually down here a little bit further. I think it's number 6, not number 5. Wait, what am I counting? 1, 2, 3,
But it's
4.
efficiency in a productive way, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, right. And see, that to me is exactly what we're talking about. That would resonate with the analytical driver energy of the what we're talking about here, this side of things, but it's also now becoming more of an analytical activity. So there is this transfer of focus that's happening, and ultimately there's going to be the delegation that will occur. And obviously you can see a big chunk of that little square 4, area 4, is in power apathy. So that's, if they aren't delegating, they're certainly thinking about delegating at that area. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes.
That's really only 3 little addressable spots, but we're just talking about what's the general vibe, or to get back to the real task, what's that voice in your head sounding like now?
Oh God, here we go again.
Well, are they? Because I think this one.
I don't see it that way. I see it as let's get this under control.
Yep.
We're going to keep things moving. We're going to keep things rolling. And, here's an efficient way to do it. And it has the potential then to roll down into, whoa, this is boring.
Yeah. Because now, while this is boring, now I think I'm already outside of the green circle, or rather of the red circle. And now I might start having some problematic, because I'm losing people. In fact, if I switch back to the engagement ring layer, they're way down here in hypo awareness, down-grid awareness. And right now, going back to that square we're looking at, they're in intention, solidly in intention. A little bit of a, well, it's still mid-grid overall, but it's starting to slip a little bit down-grid intention. And that's why I think it's kind of moving into this, we need to get it off of our shoulders. So if we can delegate it, we need to delegate it. If we can formalize it, we need to formalize it. If we can just turn it into a procedure or a policy, we need to just do that. But you hear the statement, everything I'm saying is more of a statement of intention. I haven't done it yet. It hasn't been formalized. It hasn't been delegated. It's still in the works. And that's what I think is going on there. Once it's actually given, now I think it slips down into down-grid awareness, or somewhat down-grid awareness. Yeah, not as bad as it could get, but yeah. Is this interesting to you guys as you look at these layers? Yeah,
Yes.
Lots going on.
Yep.
And we've been talking about those energies. So I suppose I could throw, is it this one? No, it's this one. Yeah. So that little square we're talking about right now, area 4, it's kind of like on the border between the amiable driver and an expressive analytical. It's interesting that when I get those 2 people, those 2 voices singing back and forth, they could be quite the duet. Because the amiable driver is saying, we want to move this forward, so it's a good resource we can use. That amiable is about thinking about how people are impacted by things. And so that amiable driver energy is basically saying, well, let's definitely move forward on this. This is really great. It's really working. Now let's put it into the way that's easiest for our people to do, most replicatable by our people to do. And then some analytical, some designer type is coming along and going like, well, we could do it this way. Or I could do it this, we could put it up online, we could, because you got that expressive analytical thing. This area is very exciting to analyticals, as excitement in analyticals actually shows itself. Yeah, so yeah, I don't think they're doing any cartwheels, but their creative juices are definitely flowing. And remember that creative problem solving lives up grid, because the problem lives up grid. Down here, this is creativity is what's really running the show. And so let's say this expressive analytical is an expert at all things related to your online delivery of training programs. You got to believe they're fully fluent, if not very curious about all the latest, greatest innovations in the world of online learning. And so this person just saying like, I just really want it formalized. Can we just turn it into and they're like, oh, we could create, you get the idea?
Yeah.
So, and sadly, if that creative juice isn't allowed to flow, then I think they're going to become more and more routine. And now you're going to end up even further downgrade what's going on. So we're talking a bit about both of these. All right.
So you said creativity is upgrade?
creative problem solving is upgraded.
Oh, okay, okay.
Because a problem exists, and right, you can see where I'm squiggling on the change grid. This
Yes.
energy, this general vicinity would have summoned on other resources, other people for input and guidance and all that. They would have wanted to be far more cooperative and whatever it is. And so this is a brainstorm session is happening up here.
Okay.
What's going on? Where when we talk about true artistic creativity lends itself downgrid. For you to be a good artist, you've got to know your medium. And so we expect you to have a higher level of ability, but still be an experimenter as part of your, the creative kind of process.
Right.
So creative energy lives here. The world's best architecture, the world's best paintings were, what you name the art form, the best symphonies were all written by expressive analyticals.
So they
had
like
to know their
the,
stuff.
right. So they like the practicality of that kind of thing, but they may not be necessarily interested in the implementation of things, right?
I think this energy says, I refuse to be confined by the stuff that's always been in place. So
yeah.
no architect wants to design a building that's already been designed. No,
Right.
no composer is going to write what's already been written. So they're all saying, but thank you very much for the structure. I do appreciate the structure and I appreciate the history behind it. That's that analytical voice understanding that they have to acknowledge everything that has been brought to the table before them. But this expressive analytical has a mind that's just saying, oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And then put a little bit of that driven analytical energy into the mix. And now they actually follow through and do it.
Interesting. I think you just described me.
Did I? You
Yeah,
tell.
I'm never short of ideas, although I'm trained, a physician, so I'm trained like a scientist, but I've always had this creative nature, and many assessments and tests said that I'm creative. If I'm not left to do that on a startup team, then I get frustrated, but I'm not so interested necessarily or excited about the implementation of things, because I'm always asked, well, wow, it's a great idea, but how are we going to do it?
Yeah.
And that's where you'll lose me.
Yeah, well, and so let's look about our little trip around there. And I'll give you guys an example. I was doing something where I wanted something on the TV in the background. And what I find are the best things to watch in the background while you're really doing more productive kinds of things are things like cooking shows, because you only really need to watch the first few minutes where they tell you what the challenge is. And then you want to watch judging. All the stuff that happens in between, it's just not necessary. Or where you're watching one of these fashion kinds of shows like not Next Top Model, where you're making the clothes. What's that called? Project Runway.
Yeah.
One of those kinds of things. Well, that every designer has their sketchbook. So the expressive analytical energy is constantly sketching out ideas and coming up with sorts of things. But what percentage of those sketches are actually ever turned into actual fabric garments?
Interesting.
You got to be more of a driven analytical, because now you're adding a little bit more of that focus on the outcome, getting the task kind of done. And by the way, you might also be a driven expressive and get it done, but your seams are going to be sloppy. So down here, this person's got the skill set, and now they're out there making it done. And you've seen plenty of competitors on shows like that, where you just go like, they know their way around a sewing machine. So that's what this driven analytical expression is really all about. Now, it's great that they've done that, but they want to become wealthy. And so some of the shows are really not so much about your design ability, but can you design something that is marketable? And so you'll be doing things that are, with that in mind. And as you're creating those kinds of garments, you have to think about who the buyer is going to be. Are they someone who wants to buy the one-of-a-kind garments, so they're willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars? Or do I want something that really for mass consumption? In which case, the driven analytical may have figured out how to make it. The analytical has the ability to figure out the absolute most efficient way to make it. So the cheapest as far as production and shipping and all that kind of thing. And then the amiable analytical energy is the one who's really running the show, that the analytical came up with, because someone's going to have to stay on top of people and shipments and questions and all that kinds of things. And so you get the idea. That's kind of, and by the
Yeah.
way, if they're actually a business, they all need to move upgrade and all sit inside of this analytical driver quadrant, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I would want them.
So T, that I think that what Brian just offered us illustrates the complexity of what we're discussing, because when we were talking earlier about someone who may wind up with a challenge of around 6 and ability around 8, when we consider the natural progression of the grid, we were talking about delegating and that kind of thing. For me, my interpretation was that it's probably someone who no longer finds that object to be the shiny object.
Ah,
You know, you think about what Brian just said in terms of where he loses interest, you know, but then think about it if we think about the importance of the activity. And let's say that the importance of the activity remains high,
yes.
yet that interest is declining and moving down towards apathy. I think that creates a whole different complexity.
It certainly does. And that's why what we really say is that the best expression of this, and by the way, these all would be overlaid right here on the driver quadrant. I just want to use this area. But this is the situation where you have to go, am I starting to see sloppy errors? Is there carelessness now, because these people all have very high level of ability to do something. It's not challenging for them. They have a long track record of doing it very successfully. So what's happening is, as you've characterized it, they're losing interest. Well, how does losing interest manifest itself in a way that I would notice that people are losing interest? What would I be looking for, et cetera? Well, I could certainly be looking at the people and just pick up their energy, you know, like, oh, well, they're somewhere else. But it's going to be reflected in other metrics inside of the organization. So when people have a low level of energy or are losing interest in their job, what normally measured factors do you think would be impacted at the organizational level?
They'll compromise quality. They won't show up.
Productivity.
Productivity is going to go down, quality will go down, complaints will go up, all these sorts of things that companies are routinely thinking that their way to go to to fix that is to become more aggressive in the way they're managing people, when the truth be told is they need to make a closer heart connection with what those people feel is really a good use of their time. So, you know, you've got a creative person here and you're not allowing them to create. I promise you, they're going to either take their talents elsewhere or they're going to drop down grid.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's why I think this is good for a tool like a developmental tool, because think about how performance reviews are done now, you know, it's annually. So they wait to the end of the year, whereas, you know, people need real-time feedback along their entire employee cycle, you know, and then they can self-correct from there. But if you have to wait to the end of the year to find out how poor you were, that's not going to cut it in terms of
It's a bit late.
engagement.
Yeah, it's a bit late. Yeah. That's why my client in Ohio, one of the things they were always talking about as one of the key indicators is she offers a piece of software that provides feedback to companies that they use for making rather large decisions. And all of her competitors have lagging indicators, which mean that the data that they're collecting isn't going to be compiled and reported upon, maybe quarterly, in a rare situation, maybe monthly. And her software recalculates everything instantaneously. And so you're always getting live active feedback. There is no lagging indicator. There is only a leading indicator that's going on. And so I think that's what you're really talking about. Who's being satisfied with lagging and who's really wants those leading indicators. That, by the way, is why I said, like, okay, these energies are great for someone who's a creative type, but they're down in power, apathy, or apathy. They're not doing this as a living. I mean, maybe they're making some money, but mostly they're doing it because they love doing it. And, you know, it's, you know, something they find themselves, let's say, stimulated to do. I just think stimulated is too high of a tension word, but relatively speaking, they like it. So think of all the hobbyists, all the crafters, these are people who would never go on a design show or on one of those home improvement sorts of shows, but they do their own kind of thing. Well, anyone who wants to turn this into a business has got to move all four of these right up into that analytical driver quadrant. And so you could have this would be an expressive analytical driver, exactly where I'm sitting. This is a driven analytical driver, an analytical driver, and an amiable analytical driver. That's because we're saying everyone's involved in something's that's being creative. And I know I'm giving you guys a lot all at once, but I want to just finish this one little thought. So that's in the design department. But let's say that you are in an even bigger company who has the luxury of having a true expressive driver who doesn't concern themselves with the analytical aspect of what's going on. These are the avant-garde designers that are just, wanting to win a name for themselves as having the most outrageous thing in the Paris Fashion Week or whatever. The driven drivers are out there trying to sell all the big deals to all the big people, and they've never touched a sewing needle, let alone anything else. So yeah, I just wanted to bring up, just say, like, this whole relationship among these four different energies continue even when you add a different location on the change grid. So when they become primarily drivers, are all analytical drivers. So I guess my way to describe it is that we can use everything we know about tension management to understand things at a macro level. But as we zoom in tighter and tighter and tighter on a particular population or situation, we have to recognize that situation owns its own entire change grid. Well, then we're looking at more of the micro applications of tension management as it applies to a very specific situation, instead of as it applies to life in general. Is that too much?
No, it's fascinating.
No, it just helps us understand how complex it can be. I mean, it's no.
Right. Yeah, and I want to do that because I don't want the whole world, if I do this YouTube channel, to think that we all created nothing more than a parlor game.
Well, part of it is if you keep it short enough, they can listen again because they'll be able to take it in maybe after two or three times.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, one last aspect of this whole positively living kind of thing is that there's a way of uniting the change grid and positively living together. And that is that when you become a member of the community, which is free, they get invited to this weekly positively living webinar. And each week there is, there's a question of the month. You guys and I played with that a few sessions ago, where I just said, what are some important, really life level questions, situations that people should ask themselves? And one of the ones you guys came up with is the one that I've used as the first question in this whole kind of series, is about living the life you want most. And so what I'm saying is that once you've had this experience, why don't you join our community, where we'll send you a question every month, and then we'll take the positively living sessions of that month and we'll talk about that and how to get the best out of it, the best out of people or whatever. So that's what that is really all about. So I want to pull people in from a situation that exists only in their head to a situation that is present in society as a whole, and ultimately to a whole list of situations that apply to only them individually, but's being discussed openly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, if I can get that done, I'll be very happy. So there you go.
Then you can go sit in your egg.
Then I'll go sit in my egg. Exactly right. Yeah, and who knows, if it goes viral, maybe I can buy an egg.
There you go.
Well, listen, T, they cost $63,000.
Holy heck, really?
No, I looked it up as we were right after we were talking. They cost $63,000, and there's actually one in Manchester, New Hampshire, about three hours away from me. So
well, that would be a nice little getaway adventure to go.
Exactly. But
I wonder
say
what they charge. What do they charge for a session?
$125
Okay, well, that's not out of whack. How long is
No.
the session?
an
About-
hour.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not out of whack at all. You'll pay that much for a really good massage.
Right.
Mhm.
So
No,
yeah,
it's worth it. I'm thinking about it. So thank you very much, whoever recommended that. I'm excited.
yeah, how fun. Okay, there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, to buy one is a whole different ballgame. Yeah,
Yes, yes, yes. Well, if it goes viral though, maybe, maybe, maybe.
that's right.
There you go.
There
There
you
you go.
Offer it. You can offer it as part of the program. You know, whoever does really well in the middle of the change grid.
Oh yeah. Or we'll do retreats, although that looks like a pretty bulky thing to move around. But at retreats, I could bring the egg with me.
That's right.
There you go.
On your cruise, instead of booze cruise, it's egg cruise.
There you go. Wow, can you imagine?
So we're in expressive analytical territory,
I'm
right?
saying right now, you guys are all being very expressive. That's very creative thinking going on. I love it.
Welcome to
Okay.
my world.
All right.
There you are. Okay. Good talking to y'all. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.